everyone, it's Evelyn. Now, if you've been following my videos, it will come as no surprise to you that one of my top 10 focal flowers is dinner plate dahlias. In fact, that's what I'm known for, my dinner plate dahlias. So of course they're my number one top 10 focal flowers. And for a number of reasons. Aside from the fact that they're absolutely beautiful, they also grow really well in our climate. I start them early in my seed room, so I get a long blooming period for them. They bloom, regular dahlias actually start blooming for me about the 3rd or 4th week of June. The dinner plate dahlias start near the beginning of July, and they go straight through the first killing frost, which is generally in November. So that's a long time period. I also get lots of flowers off of each plant. I mean, it's unbelievable how prolific they are in blooms. So there's no reason for me not to love them. They are everything you would want from a focal flower. Now, when they bloom in November or late October, there's really nothing else to pair them with. But they actually look really, really good with some dried flowers poking out of them, as you can see by this bouquet here. This was my very last bouquet of the season this past year. And it's just the dinner plate dahlias and some of the regular dahlias are simply paired with dried poppy pods and dried astilbe fronds, and then it's got 1 or 2 laurel branches in there as well. That's it, and it's still gorgeous. So clearly, dinner plate dahlias gotta make my top 10 focal flowers. Next on my list, what I'm going to do is work backwards. Because they're the last blooming focal flower, I'm going to work backwards to the spring. So the next one up would be sunflowers. Sunflowers, like dahlias, have a long blooming period, but that's only if you plant them in succession, because I plant the pro cuts, which are one and dones, which means once you cut it, you're not going to get another flower, unlike the dahlias, which produce flowers over and over and over again off the same plant. So the sunflowers I start to get blossoms from in June. And while they will still bloom in September, they are affected by the slightly shorter and slightly cooler days. Not even days, cooler nights, because the days are still pretty warm in September for us, but the nighttime temperatures start to drop quite a bit. And that affects them a lot. So what ends up happening is instead of growing 5 or 6 feet tall, they're now only going to grow about 3 feet tall, immediately go into a flower head, and that flower head is going to be about half the size, because the flower knows winter's coming and it wants to propagate itself before it gets killed off. So while it's still a usable flower in September, it's no longer a focal flower. It's just a small little filler flower, which is fine because my dahlias are blooming like crazy at that time, and it can just be paired with them. It can be paired with dahlias even when it's bigger, as you can see by this photo here. I mean, you look at that, even though those sunflowers are the same size as the dahlias, they don't compete with each other because they are completely different in texture. The sunflower's got that flat face, it's got that big disc in the center and just a thin row of petals around the outside, whereas the dahlias are just full-headed, massive petals in color. So they pair really, really nicely. But what makes them pair nicely is also then the fillers that are breaking forth from the volume of mass, creating airiness, movement, a little bit of sparkle, razzle-dazzle, whatever you want to call it. That kind of then makes this particular bouquet of sunflowers and dahlias really, really sing. Next on my list of top 10 focal flowers are Ito peonies. Now, the reason I'm focusing on my Ito peonies, I have 8 of them rather than my herbaceous peonies, of which I have 6, is because I got the Ito peonies first, and they're already being able to be cut from. Herbaceous peonies, not so much. I have one herbaceous peony that had 1 blossom last year, and it's beautiful, but that doesn't give me any information as to whether or not it's going to make a top 10 cut flower. The Itos, on the other hand, did. They're a lot like the dinner plate dahlias. They're large, they command attention. In fact, if you look at this bouquet here, it looks a lot like a dinner plate dahlia, and if it wasn't for the time of year, you might think that it was. This particular peony, Bartzilla, it's blooming at the end of this, I believe this bouquet, this photograph was taken at the end of May, very last week in May. So clearly I don't have any dinner plate dahlias yet, so that's why these are really, really important as a focal flower for me as well, because they're giving me that really big, giant, beautiful, lush flower at a time when I don't have sunflowers or dahlias blooming yet. To try and add to that large and lush, I've added in for this year, upcoming year, the Ambassador Allium. I have no comments on it as to whether or not I'm going to love it or not. I'm putting in my top 10 focals because I think I am, which is why I bought the bulbs for it. It's got a 7-inch diameter, so it's got that great big beautiful size. And I've used enough smaller alliums of similar color, but maybe only like a 4-inch diameter in bouquets. And in fact, there was one in that Bartzilla bouquet. I'll put that one up here quickly so you can see that in there. And it looks beautiful in there mixed in with those flowers. But this Ambassador Allium is going to be bigger, so it's going to be more commanding of attention. And if it just sticks up a little bit higher on its own, it's really going to add a lot to a bouquet. I think, I'm hoping, and I'm guessing that it will, which is why it makes my top 10, into my top 10 focal flowers. Then comes ranunculus. Completely opposite. Ranunculus are not bold and demanding. They're kind of small, especially for me for a focal flower, and very demure, but full petaled and very lush, and everybody loves them. And what really makes them great for me is our climate. Again, like the dahlias, they thrive in our climate, but for a different reason. We have a pretty warm May, usually, but June is always on the cooler side. For whatever reason, we get a bit of an Arctic cold front coming down in June, and it gets colder for that month. So when the ranunculus start blooming in May, they will bloom straight through into July because they're thriving in the fact that the temperatures aren't getting hotter and hotter and hotter, but have actually gone a little bit cooler again. So I get a lot of ranunculus blooms. So for me, for that reason, as a tiny urban flower farmer, it really has to make into my top 10 cut flowers of focals just because of how long it blooms for. And I can't quite get it blooming for Mother's Day yet. I keep trying, but I just don't think the temperatures are quite right yet outside for it to want to do that in our climate. It always starts blooming right after Mother's Day. So the 6th focal flower is right back up to a great big one again. And this focal flower is actually not on our property. It's on my neighbor's property, and it's a red rhododendron. She doesn't know what type of red rhododendron it is. I don't. It grows about 20 feet tall. It's planted right up against our fence, and it's on the side of the house where there's only a walkway between the house and the fence. And because it's right up against the fence and it's 20 feet high and it's spilling in mostly our direction because that's the side the sun is, I have to prune that thing anyway just to keep it from hitting our house. And if I'm pruning it, I might as well use it. We have a large rhododendron on our property, and it's a massive pink one. It's more than 20 feet tall. It's huge. But the pink rhododendron, those flowers don't hold up as a cut flower nearly as well as the red one does. And the red one looks just absolutely beautiful in bouquets. Those almost laurel-like looking leaves, shiny green leaves, that's from the rhododendron. So not only is it putting a really lush, stunning red flower into the bouquet or flower arrangement, it's also offering a collar of beautiful green leaves that look just beautiful in bouquets as well. So the 7th focal flower that I'm putting on my top 10 list is actually one that I haven't sold as a flower at my roadside flower wagon yet. I've sold a few of them because I do have them growing in my yard, and I've cut a few of them as cut flowers. But it's the hyacinth, and I'm not selling it as a cut flower. I am selling it as a focal flower, but in a 1-gallon pot with 3 flowers growing out of it, so 3 bulbs in the bottom of the pot. And I know that 1-gallon pots sell well with early spring bulbs in them in my flower wagon, because my number 2 focal flower and my number 1 focal flower is also sold that way, and that of course would be tulips and daffodils. So the daffodils and the tulips sell extremely well as a not as a cut flower, as a flowering potted plant. And I'm guessing that the hyacinths will as well. Now, if they don't, because it's a perennializing flower, I will simply plant them in the garden and next year use them as cut flowers if they don't do well in the 1-gallon pots. But I'm pretty sure they will. There are so many people out there that live in condominiums who don't have the opportunity to plant bulbs in a garden in the fall, and it doesn't occur to them to plant them into pots and put them on their deck. But when they see them, it's like a kid in a candy store when you've got all that color on the street. When they see them there, they want them, and they'll buy them, and they'll put them on their balcony, on their porch, on their deck. They'll give them as a gift to somebody who knows the gardens because it's beautiful. And they do sell really, really well. The only year that I've had problems with them really was last year, and that's because it was so unbelievably hot. All of my tulips and daffodils blew open at exactly the same time, and we're done. I mean, it was like within I had less than a week to sell it all, and in most of that week, our road was closed due to road work. So I couldn't sell them even though I tried. But that's okay, because they perennialize, and I can use all the ones that I didn't sell last year, as well as the ones that I bought this past, and potted up for fresh ones for this upcoming year. Now that leaves me with one focal flower, which, believe it or not, is a cut flower, and it blooms before the daffodils and tulips. Well, it overlaps the daffodils and the tulips a bit, but it starts to bloom before them. The 10th and final focal flower are camellia. They are beautiful. I mean, look at that. That's just stunning. And that bush is on my yard, and you can see in my property, and you can see how prolific that little tiny bush is. Now, there's not a whole lot I can pair that with at the time of year that it's blooming, because it starts blooming around the middle of April, which for me is quite often before the daffodils start. They usually start the 3rd week of April, and then the tulips will start at the beginning of May. But because we warm up really quickly at that time period, so we don't have that length of time for tulips and daffodils that a lot of people have, because we're cool right up until the last week in April, and then it warms up dramatically, and then it cools off again for June. Now, the camellias can be bloomed with cherry branches, and the cherry branches are just starting to put buds on that are just starting to open up, and I have access to a cherry tree where we can cut branches from, and the leaves on it, which are also just starting to open up, are also that beautiful burgundy brown color. So as you can see in this bouquet, just how beautiful that is. It's a very simple bouquet, but it's beautiful. And it's at a time of year when very few people have anything blooming in their garden. So those camellia bouquets are just an absolute hit, and they're absolutely fantastic. So those are my top 10. Now I'm wondering, what are yours? Are yours mostly the same? Do you have any top 10s in there that I haven't listed? If you do, put them in the comments section below. If there's any you disagree with me on, put that in the comments section below too. Also, if you're wondering if tulips in plant pots are even profitable, check out this video over here, and I'll see you over there. Thanks for watching. Bye.